So today I'm joined by Sky Sports presenter and Liverpool Football Club TV presenter, Rob Jones. Now, Rob, thank you for joining me, first of all.
No problem.
So firstly, let's talk about when you were my age, so 13, 14, and you were in secondary school. What did you want to be when you eventually did grow up? And when was it first coming into your head that you could be a football presenter and do that for your living?
Well, I think my mum would probably say firstly that I still haven't grown up. But when I was 13 or 14, believe it or not, this is what I wanted to do. And other than probably a couple of little spells, really short spells of wanting to do other bits and bobs during my life, this was pretty much all I've ever remembered wanting to do. To be honest, I think I was probably quite perceptive as a kid that I realised that I was never going to be good enough to play any sport to a great level. So I remember sort of watching or listening to Five Live was how I sort of got into it, really, I guess. And I sort of I didn't know loads about the football at the time. I was probably way younger than 13 or 14, but I just loved listening to the radio, particularly when I went to my grandparents to stay, and I thought it was really interesting, even when I didn't know loads about some of the players. And then I guess I sort of did what you do now, really, that I played games of basketball and I would write little match reports and type them up and print them off and put them in a folder. And I would go to watch Villa with my season ticket and I'd write match reports, or I'd go to other things like basketball games and stuff and write stuff up. And then when I went to an interview for my master's, which was when I was sort of 21 or 20, I guess, when I went for the interview, I had this folder of stuff to give them or show the lecturers. And you know, like yourself, you have something to show. You know, it's very easy to sit anywhere and say, this is what I want to do. But it's a lot better when you actually show people, you know, that you are already doing it. And that's, I guess, what I did with my little folder of stuff. And then, yeah, luckily since then, it's just been taken step after step to get to this stage.
Yeah, definitely. As you said, I'm trying to do the same thing as starting off at a young age and getting that experience for when that opportunity does obviously come around. So, at the moment, you're obviously presenting for Sky Sports News and LFC TV. So how did that first proper opportunity in football media come around for yourself?
Well, the first thing I ever did was work for a local radio station called Beacon Radio, which I'm not even actually sure exists anymore. But it was just doing games on a Saturday, so it was Shrewsbury Town and AFC Telford, who were then, I think probably still are, like in the Conference North. But it was a great experience. I remember my first game I ever did was that Shrewsbury were playing Ipswich in the cup, and it was 3-3. Ipswich had a young kid who you will know now called Connor Wickham. I think he was probably at 16 or 17 at the time. He scored a hat-trick. Roy Keane was the manager. So that was my first game, and then my first ever real sort of full-time job was with Leicester City. And your current manager now, Nigel Pearson, was the manager then. And again, it was an amazing sort of first season. I joined in the January, having sort of finished uni the May before, and that second half of the season they got to the playoff semi-final of the championships and lost on penalties. So then I went from Leicester to Everton. I did just over a year at Everton, and then I got a job at my first job at the BBC, which was a show called Late Kickoff, which was an amazing show doing football league clubs. And I was based in the Yorkshire region. And again, we're really lucky to have some amazing stories that year. I think there's all sorts of problems at Leeds. Sheffield United and Sheffield Wednesday were in this little race for promotion, which was amazing. And I think Huddersfield were in and around it too. So I went from that. Then I did the Olympics with the BBC, London 2012, which again was just an absolutely unbelievable experience, like a home Olympics. And some people may or may not know, my granddad was actually an Olympian himself. He was a cyclist, and he had competed the last time that the Olympics was in London way back in 1948. So for me to work on that was awesome, really. Then I went to ITV, which was based in the Channel Islands, which is, I don't know if you would know where that is, but they're tiny islands just between England and France. ITV has a little region out there. And again, it was a great place for me to go and learn and get experience. And I got to sort of midway through 2015 and felt that I'd done as much as I could, really. I'd learned a lot there, and it was time to come back to England, not just for work, but for living and stuff like that. So yeah, then I came back and started freelancing and did some stuff at ITV. Then eventually got the chance to do stuff with Liverpool and with Sky. And it's about, we'll probably talk about it later when you ask about advice and stuff like that. But particularly with freelancing, it's about sending emails, making phone calls, basically just begging people that you want to work for them. And that was the case with Liverpool and with Sky as well. And yeah, I started at Liverpool, I think March 2016, and I was doing a few days a week. And then I had a block off where I went to Rio to do the Olympics, and then came back, carried on with Liverpool, and then started Sky pretty much straight after that. And I've been doing the two of them plus other bits and bobs ever since, really.
Yeah, so as you said there, you've been working for Sky for just over 5 years. Liverpool for just over 5 years now, and you present obviously the Matchday show on LFC TV as well as others for Liverpool as well. So over your time at Liverpool, you've obviously been able to present some amazing matches as well as the Liverpool versus Sevilla Europa League final, and that obviously Champions League season as well, where that was that brilliant night at Anfield. So, what has it been like working at Liverpool first and being able to present all those matches and watch all those matches live in the flesh, hear the Anfield roar and stuff, and also interview legends like Steven Gerrard and players that are playing now like Gini Wijnaldum and Trent Alexander-Arnold?
Yeah, I mean, I've been very lucky, really, that ever since I've been there. Again, I started probably doing shows for Liverpool only about 5 or 6 months after Jurgen Klopp had joined. So I've been there pretty much the whole time that Jurgen has been there, and that's obviously been great because it's been an amazing period of success for Liverpool. And yeah, like you said, a Europa League final, 2 Champions League finals. They've won the league for the first time in 30 years. And yeah, I mean, Steven Gerrard is one who I spoke to, and he was the under-18s manager at the time. But yeah, he's obviously someone who you watched growing up. I remember doing a show. They make a show called 60 Minutes, which is just an interview about the career of a legend. And I think the first one I ever did was Michal Owen, who, when I was your age, was my like absolute hero. I don't know if you've ever seen the goal he scored at the World Cup in France '98.
Yeah, I think I have seen that on
Yeah,
YouTube and
if you
stuff.
haven't, go straight on YouTube afterwards and watch it. But it's an amazing goal. It runs past about 4 or 5 players. He's only 18 at the time. So yeah, he was one of my absolute football heroes growing up. So to do a show of him, and do you know what? He's one of the few people who, every time I see him now, I'm still a bit like, oh my god, it's Michal Owen. And yeah, the same really with the current squad. I mean, they're all nice blokes, really, and I think that that's a really important tip. I think when you're ever interviewing anyone, is that you've got to try and remember it's a conversation between 2 people, and try your best not to be sort of intimidated by anyone. But yeah, Jurgen Klopp has pretty much always been a really nice guy. It's obviously difficult sometimes when they lose games because you sort of have to phrase your questions carefully, like you do with any manager. But yeah, it's been great, and to present a parade, the day after they'd won the Champions League final, and see like we were on the top of this massive building in Liverpool, and all you could see was people all around, and this bus and the excitement. Yeah, it was brilliant, and I wish, the only regret really is that I wish we'd have been able to do something again like that for them winning the league, but with COVID, it was a real shame that obviously it was done in an empty stadium this season and there was no parade. And yeah, I think there's been so many moments, I think, over the last year for all of us, in your life and my life and everyone's life, where you think, oh, I wish it had been different, but it couldn't be. And yeah, I guess we'll always have that one Champions League parade, even if there's never another one.
Yeah, we'll go on to obviously talk about last season, as it was a crazy season, not only for yourself at Liverpool, but for Sky Sports, I expect, as well. But before we go on to talk about all of that, let's just talk about that Champions League season a few years ago, where obviously they had that amazing win against Barcelona at Anfield. Being a Villa fan yourself and presenting that game, was it just so special? Because I expect you weren't expecting Liverpool to get anything out of it, and not being a Liverpool fan yourself, even though you're a Villa fan, you must have still been absolutely amazed presenting that game.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, you always want Liverpool to win. I mean, it's very weird. The first couple of seasons I did it, Villa were in the Championship. The first 3 seasons, in fact, so it didn't really matter. It was like, well, I want Liverpool to do well in the Premier League, and I am supporting Villa in the Championships. It's only been the last couple of seasons when Villa have come up that it's been slightly weirder. But yeah, that night was just the most bizarre. I presented the first leg, and I remember Liverpool had some chances. They lost the first leg 3-0, but they hadn't really played that badly. And then right towards the end, Messi scores this unbelievable free kick to make it 3-0. And I remember we do a show. We don't just do a TV show now. We do a show for Facebook beforehand. And at 6 o'clock in the evening, Mark Lawrenson was the guest. And I remember the first question, I remember just saying, "Any chance?" And he was like, "No chance." And you sort of think, yeah, like even if Liverpool score 3, any team with Messi can score a goal in at any moment in the game. So we then sat in the studio, and I remember Origi scores pretty early on, and I turned to my floor manager and was like, "No way, they can't surely do this from here." And then and just carried on, and also you might remember that Mane and Firmino were both injured as. Sorry, no, Firmino and Salah were both
Yeah.
injured. It was like Origi and Shaqiri were up front with Mane, so it wasn't even the full strength Liverpool team. But yeah, it was the power of an amazing crowd, and then there was just this blitz of 15 minutes in the second half where Liverpool just scored 3 goals, and there's obviously that famous one from the short court, or the quick corner from Alexander-Arnold to Origi, and then the scenes at the end, and then obviously you're on air for an hour post match, and it's just so exciting because they've got to the final and they've done it in one of the best 2 or 3 games I've ever been at. And then it's pretty weird because you then drive home, and I still live in Birmingham. For the ease of going up to Liverpool and down to London and whatever. So I drove like 2 hours home after the game, and you're still like lying in bed, like wide awake, because there's so much adrenaline rushing through what you've just seen. And I think whatever team you supported being in the ground that night, you'd have been staggered. And then amazingly, the next night, I sat at home and watched Tottenham do pretty much exactly the
Yeah.
same thing, and they scored in the last minute against Ajax and to set up the final. And the final was actually far less interesting a game than any of those two. But yeah, it was that amazing. I think there've been a few. I think Roma had knocked some. Maybe that had been the season before. But anyway, there've been a couple of great comebacks in recent
Yeah.
years. I think Barcelona beat PSG 6-1 or something, didn't they?
Yeah, that was
And
crazy.
yeah, absolutely capped it off. So yeah, it was and will always be, I think, one of the best games I will ever go to in my life.
Yeah, and as well as that brilliant game, and obviously it's probably one of Liverpool's best games they've played in a good few years. But being a Villa fan yourself as well, you must have seen some amazing atmospheres at Villa Park, as you said, with your season ticket. But that full time when the referee blew his whistle and the Liverpool players went over to the Kop and your Neville Cologne played, that must have gave you goosebumps. And then obviously the hour talking about it all must have been absolutely amazing afterwards.
Yeah, well, to be honest, the weird thing is that so it's a really sort of slightly boring story but there are certain rules about what you can film at Champions League games and where you can be. So actually, we have a studio that's sort of outside the ground, sort of above the sky, well, in the sky a little bit, and that's where we have to do our pre-match and post-match for. Because you're not allowed in the ground for Champions League games, whereas Premier League games and Cup games is a little bit different. So actually, with about 2 minutes of injury time to go, we have to run from inside the ground to the studio outside to be ready to go on air. So I wasn't in the ground to watch the stuff in front of the cop, and you could see it on, on the monitors and the screens that we have in the studio. But yeah, unfortunately, I wasn't in it for that. But yeah, it was amazing. It's one of those like cliche things people talk about, these European nights at Anfield, and you don't realize it until you're there about how amazing they are. And that one was so good. But I don't know if you remember the season before, they played Manchester City in the quarterfinals and they beat them
Yeah.
3-0. I mean, again, for the first half an hour of that game, Liverpool were unbelievable. Like Man City looked like rabbits in headlights, and they beat them 3-0. Then the semi-final, they beat Roma 5-2.
Yeah.
And both of those games, and both of them were just extraordinary as well. And then I guess like the other end of the scale is the last time I was at Anfield in front of a full crowd anyway, was the game against Atletico Madrid, which is still the last sort of high profile game in England that was in front of a full stadium, which seems amazing, doesn't it? Because that was more than a year ago, and we haven't seen a full ground since.
Yeah, it has been a crazy year. How crazy has it been for yourself, not only working with Liverpool and presenting, um, and obviously no fans in the ground, but as well as Sky Sports? I expect working at Sky for the past 2 years or so, it's been completely different this year than ever
Yeah,
before.
yeah. I mean, what's it been like for you not being able to go to the game and watching your team on telly and stuff?
It has been it's been crazy because you think of the things you miss from obviously on a Saturday. It's the thing you look forward to at the end of the week, isn't it? Waking, like going to the ground at midday, getting lunch or something, and then walking into the ground, seeing the players warm up, walk out. 90 minutes of football, which as a Bristol City fan, it isn't always and entertaining, but it's still good to be in and around it. And now it just seems to be that 90 minutes in the weekend that you spend watching the football, and then that's it. But when you're at stadiums, it's pretty much that whole Saturday.
Yeah, well, look, keep at it, and hopefully by August we'll all be back in, and the grounds will be
Hopefully, yeah.
fuller. But to answer your question, so weirdly enough, I was working for Sky there was a day last March on a Friday where pretty much everything got cancelled. So I was in the studio, and sort of every 15-20 minutes we were getting another bit of breaking news saying, look, this has been cancelled, the Masters has been called off, the Premier League's been called off, F1, tennis, anything you could think of pretty much was being called off. But one of the things that was called off was the England's tour of Sri Lanka, the cricket, which is actually where I was supposed to be, where I ended up going with a couple of my friends that night. So I was doing the shift at Sky when I finished at like 4:30, and then going straight to Heathrow Airport, which is quite near to Sky Studios, to fly off with a couple of friends. So I got to Sky in the morning, um, checked my emails as I got out of the car, having driven down, and one of the first things I saw was the tests are off. So as I'm walking in to do my work, I'm also on the phone to my mate saying, look, what do you want to do? Do you want to risk it? Do you want to go just for a holiday? We're not going to see the cricket, but we should go. So then we went out to Sri Lanka and had what was supposed to be a 10-day holiday, which turned into 2 weeks because of flight problems. And we were supposed to go back through Doha, which then closed its borders and stuff like that. So from that moment on, it's just never been the same. And yeah, like you and like everyone else, covering football in empty grounds is really difficult. And to hear you talk about how much you love it makes me realize how lucky I am to have gone to
Mm.
some of the games. Because yeah, I know so many people who would have loved to just sit even in just one game over the course of the last year. Have Bristol City ever been open for 2,000 fans or not?
No, well, funny enough, we were able to buy tickets. We spent 40 quid on tickets, but we never actually got to use the tickets.
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, it's tragic, and I was at the Villa game against Liverpool where they won 7-2, which was
Really.
just again a ridiculous game. And you do the interviews after the match, and then you get in the car. And when I was driving home, I was thinking it was amazing, but think how good that would have been if there'd have been 42,000 people in there. And then we had a little spell over Christmas or just before Christmas where there was 2,000 in.
Yeah.
So I did Liverpool against Spurs, I did Fulham against Liverpool, and then I did Oxford against Northampton, I think it was, in League One with 2,000 fans in. And it was just brilliant. It was like you didn't quite know what to expect, but 2,000 people make so much difference. And then to go from doing those three games in the space of just over a week to then going back to empty, it's it's difficult. But like I said, when you hear fans who haven't been for so long, and for so many people, watching your team is the best part of your week, to not be able to do that is horrible. So there's been times when I thought, oh, this is tough, and it's a bad game, and it's cold, and there aren't the fans. It is really, really difficult. But yeah, touch wood, there'll be those two Premier League games at the end of the season where every team will get their one home game with a quarter of the fans in, and then hopefully by the start of next season, it will be, if not full, then really close to full.
Yeah, whenever that date does come, hopefully later on this year, that will be one special day, definitely, for
Yeah.
everyone in the football world. Let's move away from obviously the coronavirus pandemic and move on to Sky. So you've been presenting with Sky for 2 years or so. So how did that job come around again, and what's been your favourite part of working for Sky?
Well, I've actually been doing Sky for nearly 5 years now. So I started doing the sports bulletins on Sky News. So I did that from about September of 2016, and then started doing more stuff for Sky Sports News probably from a couple of years ago. But my highlights really, as well as football, I love cricket. Like absolutely massive cricket fan, to the point of boring people really. And I was on air after my shift started after England had won the World Cup. And then I was on air for for about 5 hours. Do you remember the day at Headingley where Ben Stokes scored the
Oh
100? And
yeah, that
I mean,
massive, was that the massive game this summer, earlier last year? Yeah.
it was 2019. It seems like ages ago now, and you always forget the last summer that's been, because it was so weird. But it was
Yeah, I
it was
remember that.
2019, and England had no chance really. They were chasing like 350, which in a test match when you're batting last is super difficult. And yeah, it just they lost the ninth wicket, and they still needed about 70 odd to win. And then Ben Stokes just started smashing it all over the place, and we were on air, and we had a guest actually watching. I can't remember the game. I think it was Newcastle against Tottenham, and it was an ex-player. And by the end, he wasn't even watching the Newcastle game; he was watching the cricket. You just heard these massive like cheers from around the newsroom every time Ben Stokes hit a four or a six. And again, I was on that day till 8 o'clock, and I remember going back to where I was staying nearby, and I was actually due on the breakfast shift the next morning, so you have to be in at like 4:30, and I couldn't sleep at all. I was like, again, so excited of I'd have been unbelievably excited if I'd have just been watching that game at home, but to be on air and watching, like, again, when we were saying earlier about the Barcelona game, that Ben Stokes day at Headingley is going to be a day that not even just cricket fans but sports fans will remember forever, because it was just so amazing and dramatic. And yeah, I think that would have to be the best day at Sky, I reckon.
Yeah, I remember that one, and that must have been absolutely amazing. But as you said, not only for yourself, but for everyone involved in that day and who were watching, not only in the stadium, but live on Sky as well. So then finally, we've talked a lot about obviously Sky and Liverpool as well. But just to end off the interview, then, what would be your one piece of advice for people like myself and other people looking to make it into the sports media world?
Well, I mean, for yourself perspective, I mean, I think back to when I was a kid. Now, like seeing that little studio you've got there with your microphone, the shirts, it's looking good in the background. So, how long have you been doing that?
I started in the first lockdown, so it must have been 7 or 8 months now.
Yeah, I mean that's absolutely great to be doing something like that. There's probably a load of kids out there, young people out there who easily just sit on their Xbox or sit on their PlayStation and have done, through the pandemic or even before the pandemic, really. So to be doing, if this is what you want to do, you're making a super good step by doing all of this stuff now.
Thanks.
I mean, I could give like hours and hours of advice, really, that because I think there are so many things that are important because
Definitely.
it's not an easy industry to get into and make it into and keep doing well in. It's tough, and I remember when I was probably your age and a little bit older than your age. My mum would always say to me, and you might not realize this yet, but your mum's always right, even when you don't think she's right. So, she said to me a couple of times, like, what's your plan B then? And I was like, well, I don't really have one. I don't have one, and I never did, and I probably still don't actually. So if it all ended tomorrow, I'd be in big trouble. But you've got to be persistent. Um, like I said, you've got go and offer to do things for people, and there are times when I've done like a game in the evening and I don't get home till 1 o'clock in the morning, and then someone rings and says, "Oh, do you want to do an interview with someone at 9 o'clock tomorrow?" And you think, well, possibly some part of me would rather have a lie-in, but I'll go and do it because it shows willing and being keen and eager and enthusiastic is so important. Being sort of confident in your own ability or your own desire to do it. Like it's the same with any job, and the people who watch your videos might just not want to go into sports media, but whatever job you want to go to, if it's one of your friends who's a bit younger, like whatever you want to do, if you really have a passion for it, then keep going, keep striving and working really hard. And that's what I sometimes think that um, that's the way sometimes I sort of can measure myself against other people. I think, well, can I work harder than them? That's the basic level that that my mum and my dad and my grandparents like put into me when I was younger. Like work hard. Like honestly, in sports media, unless you're probably like Gabby Logan or Kelly Cates or Gary Lineker, you can probably sit at home with your feet up and not go after work and look at how you can get better and move on and improve. But anyone else below that proper elite level, you've always got to, you've got to badger people and you've got to phone people and say, can I do this? Or yeah, I can do this. Or I'll do a double shift and do something with you in the morning and then go and do this in the afternoon. So yeah, it's about having the miles on the clock like you're doing now and getting the experience of doing interviews or writing things. It's about being persistent, enthusiastic. It's about getting your foot in the door. So for your example, I'm guessing you live in Bristol as well, if you're a
Yeah.
Bristol City fan. Yeah, so I mean, if it takes even at that age going in to the Radio Bristol or somewhere nearby and for a couple of years making the teas or print typing things up or helping people with stats, people will know who you are and your foot's in the door, and that helps then. And to be honest, like it's probably stuff you've heard before, isn't it, about working hard and being
Yeah.
persistent, but it's not. In some ways, it's not a magic formula, and I guess the only other thing I would say is that you have to be you have to probably, well, not probably, unless you're an unbelievably isolated case, you've got to deal with people saying no every once in a while and not always getting what you want, and sports media or media and presenting particularly it's not like a job. Some of the jobs that your friends might go into at school, it's that you do this and then you'll get to that stage, then you'll get to that stage, then you'll go to that stage. And if you just follow the steps, you'll get to the top of the tree. Whereas in this business, it's not always the case. You know, sometimes you need a couple of people to like you. And that's luckily, I've had some really amazing bosses and producers over the years who've thought I'm all right. And therefore they keep giving me opportunities. But sometimes you'll think, oh, I can do that. I'm better than so-and-so, or I should be doing that. And other people might disagree. And unfortunately, sometimes there's not much you can do about that. So yeah, persistence and hard work and enthusiasm and experience would probably be the things I would say would be super important.
Yeah, that's absolutely brilliant advice from you there. So yeah, thank you for joining me today, Rob.
You're very welcome. It's been an absolute pleasure. And like I said, it's a great thing you're doing. Keep up the good work. That's all I say. And also, like you said about Bristol City, all football fans have times where it's not fun to watch them, but that makes you a football fan, doesn't it? So
Yes, definitely.
even I was on the phone this morning to one of my friends who's a commentator for Match of the Day, and he's a Man City fan, and he will remember the times when they were in what is now League One. So they weren't always good and winning the title every year. So your time will come as a Bristol City fan.
Yeah, hopefully sooner rather than later. But I guess we'll see. Hopefully in my lifetime we'll be seeing Premier League football.
That
But
would
yeah,
be
as I said, thank you for joining me today, and thank you all for watching today's interview. Obviously, if you did enjoy, make sure to like and subscribe and all that good stuff. And yeah, I'll see you guys all on the next one. Come on, you Reds.